this wilderness, you will find only Allah's terrible whimsy.
Red, yeah, it means it's recording. But you would think green would mean recording.
Right.
But red always means recording. I don't know why.
I'm a green-red colorblind anyway. So
Are you? Well, there you go.
But I can tell the difference between that green and that red.
So what does that mean? Like it's a different shade of gray or something? Or
Yes.
Okay.
It's not a different shade of gray. It's a different shade of a color.
but it's not.
I mean that looks orange to me. I don't
Okay.
know. I don't know how to explain it. But like if you have green and red font, like in a Word document,
Yeah.
I could not tell the difference between
Okay.
green and red there.
You don't have problems driving.
I do. In fact,
you?
I was one time.
I remember helping you out. We were driving somewhere in Lawrence at night.
Were you with me when we were pulled over by that cop at the blinking yellow light?
No, but it was the same thing. It was like a road. We were coming into town, and it was like a blinking light. It was like, is that yellow or red?
Yep.
And yeah,
Oh,
was
the
that-
single light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When
yeah.
we got back from the Garden of Eden.
Right.
From that trip.
But you didn't get pulled. That was just, you were just, is that a yellow or a red light? I remember.
Well, I had you to spot it for
Yeah.
me. One time I was driving with a friend, and we had a few drinks, and there was a blinking light, and I didn't ask him what color it was, and the guy next to me stopped at it, and I stopped at it. Well, it was yellow. The guy next to me took off. I took off. Cop pulled me over, and he said, you stopped at that blinking yellow light. And I said, you'll notice I stopped after that guy stopped first. He said, yeah, I did notice that. I said, because I'm red-green colorblind, and yellow throws me off, especially if I can't see the position of the color in the lights, because I go by the position. And so he stopped, so I stopped. I just trusted that he knew what color it was. He said, I believe you, and I really wish I had caught that other guy. And I'm like, well, thank you, officer. And then my buddy leans over and goes, he's lying. Don't listen to him. And I said, my friend's had a few too many drinks. I'm trying to get him home. And then we proceeded to drive to a bar and have some more drinks.
Wow.
Fortunately, we're doing this podcast anonymously, so I can't get arrested for that story. Well, you've been listening to Lost and Found and Rewound, a podcast about esoteric films that you may not have heard about. Most people haven't heard about.
And colorblindness.
And colorblindness, people who watch them that we think are special. I am Chris Lost.
I am Found Jim.
I always forget about that.
And I am Rick Rewound.
And that's basically it. There's just
That's our 3 minutes, right?
We
Got our
want-
3 minutes down.
Today, yeah. This week, I guess I should enter
the synopsis of our film, Jim.
I picked it. It was this week. It was Mountains of the Moon from 1990 by Bob Rafelson. It's a movie, I first saw around that time, 1990 or so, and just it was about this guy named Richard Francis Burton in the I guess it takes place in the 1850s, and he's a explorer and linguist. And before I'd seen this movie, I didn't know anything about him. I was surprised, and he's was a legend in his own time. And the movie is about him and John Speake going on this expedition to find the source of the Nile, and which was a big deal then. They had no idea what was going on in the center of Africa, and it was also for exploitation, basically, too. It was like the Royal Geographical Society, and to map things, and, it was all colonial expansion and all that. So basically, the first half of the movie, there's a couple expeditions. They go wandering around, and all craziness happens.
It's like a Bond movie. You have that first little introductory action
Yeah.
sequence.
Yeah,
which
it
is
kinda
that first expedition.
right out of the gate.
And then they go back to London and talk to the bosses, just like Bond does. And then they have the long adventure.
Right.
It's
true.
just a James Bond movie. I've just boiled it down. Sorry.
100 years before, yeah.
Yeah.
It seemed to me to be a film. It felt like we were watching a film from the 60s or yeah, from the 60s, kind of felt that way. But then I had to keep reminding myself that it was done in the 90s. So it had like an older film feel to it, which I like.
That's maybe maybe it's Bob Rafelson because
Are we going to launch into that?
Yeah, the whole craziness that's what people say about this movie is, I've seen a few references to people interviewing him and saying this. When I saw the previews for this, and it was directed by Bob Rafelson, I couldn't believe it. It just doesn't seem like his bag, Right. It's like he did 5 Easy Pieces and
Head.
Right, he created the Monkees. Right, basically.
Co-creator, of the Monkees.
Did he really?
Yeah, yeah. That's Raybird Productions. Yeah, they moved from basically they killed the Monkees with Head, and then went into film production. The guys Bob Rafelson and Bert Schneider, and so they created the Monkees, made a bunch of money. The first Bob Rafelson film was Head, and then I think so all those, and they produced Bob Rafelson directed 5 Easy Pieces, but then did they produce Easy Rider? I think they produced, there's a box set of Raybird Productions, so their first 5 movies or whatever are like Bob Rafelson films, but also a couple other, is Two Lane Blacktop? Maybe that's...
What drew you to this film, Jim?
I think it was probably... Siskel and Ebert or something. I remember them liking it.
2 thumbs up.
Yeah, both of them, and definitely it was something I think I saw on that show, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I kind of knew who Bob Rafelson was, but just from 5 Easy Pieces, and I don't know if I knew that around that time that he was involved with the Monkees or Head. I've probably seen Head already. I think I knew about all that, but I don't know. It definitely, I didn't see it in the theater. I rented it around probably a year after this came out, and it just sounded really interesting. And it sounds like it definitely didn't do well in the box office. It was like I think a real labor of love for Bob Rafelson. He was trying to get it made for years, and he was kind of obsessed, I guess, with Richard Burton at an early age. He knew about him and read some of his books and just kind of was really obsessed about him, and definitely was working on this movie for a long time and finally got the money to get it made. And later on, it is unusual for his, I don't know what a typical Bob Rafelson movie is, but it is very old fashioned in a way. It's like an epic. It's kind of like David Lean, like Lawrence of Arabia, but not really. It's like kind of, it starts out like that, and there's a lot of action and big epic things happening, but it's really just about, it's like a buddy picture, or it's like a road picture almost.
It is a road picture.
Except they're just walking across, but it's just about these two guys, their friendship, and how it falls apart, or they become enemies because of the outside world, basically.
It reminded me a little bit of, it actually had weird nods to, like I was pointing out this, I thought that Spielberg had ripped things off of this film, but clearly these things had happened. The Spielberg references happened before, like the Jaws scar off.
Yeah.
Where they're showing each other their scars. Mm-hmm. That was from Rick pointed out from Jaws. And then there's the natives running over the hill with the spears after him, like that, like just right off of the beginning of Raiders.
Right.
So it's the strong David Lean influence, right? I think it's just kind of like unavoidable if you're doing an epic like that, right? You're going to reference Lawrence of Arabia, I guess.
And the Lean references were very brief. I don't know if you noticed that. Like Lean will sit there and let you take in the landscape, a big wide shot for a long time, whereas he'd do a big wide shot of them walking up a sand dune or something, but then it was very brief. He was more, a lot of this film was shot in mids and close-ups, more so than in these big wide sweeping shots.
Yeah, it's definitely about the people face to face talking, and there's a lot of talking and stuff, but there are those epic action sequences, but it is more about just human relations, basically.
And I was wrong about Raybird Productions was the production company that did the Monkees and everything like that, but then they evolved into BBS, which was Bert. See, now I just lost it, but it's the two guys, Bob Rafelson, the guy who co-produced the Monkees, and then another guy, and a box set came out. This is what I remember from a box set came out with Head, Easy Rider, 5 Easy Pieces, Drive, He Said, which is, I believe is that the movie that, Drive, He Said is a movie that Jack Nicholson directed. It's Jack Nicholson's first movie. And then, did I say Last Picture Show?
No.
And King of Marvin Gardens, 5 Easy Pieces. Did I say that? Yeah. So, yeah, they had this kind of run right at the beginning where they were involved in all that kind of new Hollywood stuff. And so Bob Rafelson was part of that. Yeah. And then it all fell apart. Also Hearts and Minds, actually, that famous documentary about Vietnam. I think that's the other guy, right, did that. Or no, he didn't do it, but he produced it. I think that was Bert Schneider was into the Vietnam documentary thing. and Bob Rafelson was into directing narrative films. So yeah, the 60s thing, right? Yeah, so it does seem like it's just kind of like a way of showing that all the stuff that was important in the 60s happened in the 1850s also, right?
Right. Like, yeah, that's the whole, Richard Burton was, well, he was like a linguist and everything, and he was kind of famous for, or notorious for introducing like Eastern like works of kind of erotic works that he translated, like it was like the Perfumed Garden, and I don't know if the Kama Sutra, it was like stuff like that, but he was, it was kind of very risque and
counterculture.
Yeah
And there's drug stuff in the movie,
right? He was
talking about cannabis, he's hallucinating and stuff. People die.
He stands up for the Africans who people are saying are lazy.
Indigenous people, whatever you call it, native peoples, and saying that they're different but equal, right? Not subordinate. Yeah, so there are a lot of themes that you would see in 60s films, but translated or filtered through the 1850s.
Right. Yeah. And he's, I think Bob Rafelson said in an interview I read about it that he was a rock star, or like to not just him, to Bob Rafelson as a kid, but other people. It was like he didn't discover him, but other people his age were like really into Richard Burton too, which I never knew. But I don't know, maybe that he was exactly that. He's kind of progressive and ahead of his time.
He was really good looking. That's what I mean, is it
sure.
Like Rick had asked at one point in the film, who's the bad guy and who's the good guy? And I think the good guy was Burton because he's better looking than the other guy.
They were both very handsome. It's a very manly movie, but it's also, the same thing with Lawrence of Arabia, where it's, they actually, I guess the one guy kisses Richard Burton, but it's more like, it's like manly love, but not necessarily. It's definitely got the homoerotic thing of Lawrence of Arabia, which I don't know if I saw an edited version of Lawrence of Arabia when I was a kid, or I just had no idea what was going on. But you watch Lawrence of Arabia now, and it's just like, ooh, wow, there's a lot going on here that I did not pick up on.
Well, people didn't get that he was raped in that either.
Exactly. And I'm trying to remember if that part was just not in the movie, the version I saw. Like I saw it.
I just think it's so subtle that if you didn't understand those type of things as a kid, you wouldn't go there. Yeah. One funny thing about this film as we talk about it, the risque stuff, is when I was looking through IMDb on it, the plot keywords were in this order: female rear nudity, gay, female frontal nudity, kissing while having sex, premarital sex, Nile River, Africa.
Wow. Yeah.
It took a while to get to Nile River in Africa.
It's got everything.
Which I would think would be the first two. But I mean, I guess if you're trying to get people to read your article,
right,
you got to go for the female nudity, the kissing while having sex.
That's the thing I like about it, is it's got that element of the classic kind of 50s, 60s Africa, European or English colonial movie, but at least it's a little more farther along in terms of social advancement, right? Where like the people of color in the film, there are at least a couple that are sympathetic and have kind of pass whatever the equivalent of a person of color Bechdel test is, right? Whereas it's sometimes they feel a little like props, but there's at least some work towards making those characters.
Well, there's the translator.
The translator's good, and then
the C-3PO archetype.
Yeah,
he was.
I guess he's a real person too. This is based definitely facts. There are facts. I read Richard Burton's book after seeing this movie. I got his actual account, and he was definitely, like I said, like progressive and ahead of his time. But his books are pretty readable too for that time. A lot of that kind of Victorian era stuff. The people, the writing is so overblown, and these like paragraph, like sentences that go on for a whole page or something. But it's kind of hard reading. But it's definitely, compared to other people of the time, it's actually pretty readable. And the movie seems kind of accurate. It's definitely like him and Speak. Like, I couldn't finish Speak's book. I tried to read his account, the real book, and I couldn't get through it at all. And Burton was definitely a real writer, and very like a humanitarian kind of, it comes through. It's like he really cared. Like the movie goes in, it shows this very clearly. I think, that it sounds like that's how he was actually like in his writing. He was really interested in other cultures, and was not very racist. I mean, even though I think this movie, from what I've read, is it kind of is a little bit rosy. He had some kind of slightly racist things but for his time, he was way ahead of his time.
Right.
And speak from his writing, like the book, it's dull and it's very pompous and racist, like blatant, much more
Speak's
blatantly.
book?
Yeah.
Well, because he's the villain.
Yeah. But I mean, in real life, in the real book I read, they were like night and day. I couldn't finish his book. He was definitely more of his time, and Burton was obviously way ahead of his time, and so I think that's pretty accurate.
I think Burton was doing it to absorb the humanity or to have the experience, whereas Speak was there to conquer.
Right.
And that's kind of, he was like, I'm pretty sure it's this lake. I'm not going to really make sure.
Right.
Well, let's just get the hell out of here.
And it kind of comes by in passing, but the idea that the publisher, I think it was right, that was stressing that Speak's an Englishman, whereas Burton has Irish heritage, and so we don't think of that now. It's like, oh, they're both white people, but like the reality is that if you were Irish, you were a lower class, right? That was just the thing. And so the argument could be made that the reason why he had that perspective or is that symbol is because he was not of the upper class of England, right? He was definitely
kind of not well-to-do, but he wasn't poor or anything. And actually, he kind of grew up, I guess, in like France and Italy, and kind of had this kind of almost continental upbringing, but was a holy terror, and got into fights and everything. But made it to Oxford, and it sounded like he hated it, and was like exactly that. Was like surrounded by all these spoiled rich kids, that were just I don't know. It was just like a party. He was actually kind of serious, or he was obviously a wild person, I think, from an early age, but he found them all frivolous, I think. He was like kind of serious, even though he could be crazy and stuff, but he was already like studying languages. I think he had, like in the movie, they say he spoke like 20 some languages.
23.
Yeah.
I think the actors did an awesome job of conveying that just in their demeanor and the way they spoke and obviously the things they said. I found this to be a very delightful film. I mean, it was long, but I didn't feel long, and I was engaged throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, it was the right length for these kind of epics. Like sometimes they try to stretch them out even more, and it's because of the Lawrence Arabia thing, and it's like no, I think that's enough time.
Right.
2 hours, a little more than 2 hours. Yeah, and I think about these actors; they're both great. And it's like, oh, this is the best movie they were ever in, right? I mean, I don't feel like they're
not very well known, or they definitely weren't when they made the movie.
That's, of course, because the two of us don't watch Game of Thrones, but Chris has seen Game of Thrones, so the
Speak is played by Jorah Mormont from Game of Thrones, and he's quite good in that.
What's amazing to me is like how instantaneously when someone says a Game of Thrones name, how my brain just shuts off. Like when I hear a name like Jorah Mormont, I just go, ugh. I'm not a Game of Thrones fan. I didn't make it through that first episode.
My wife is a huge fan. She's read all the books. She's met George R.R. Martin.
Mountbatten?
She actually met George R.R. Martin and Kim Kardashian in the same evening.
Wow.
So, it's a wonderful evening.
The twin towers of
She spoke with both of them, actually.
Western culture.
Yeah. Actually, I got this wonderful Kim Kardashian story, but I can't tell it because it's my brother-in-law's story.
Right.
And if I steal it, I would feel guilty. I would feel like Speak
Exactly.
claiming that he had discovered the origin of the Nile without giving Burton credit.
But that's the metaphor, You asked, like, how did England get this power? It's just like he was right. Speak was right. He, was...
He was right.
Yeah, he was full of hubris, but he wound up being right. It wasn't a fatal flaw. Well, it was a fatal flaw, literally. I guess, his problems.
So, spoiler alert, why did Speak kill himself? Do you know more about that, Jim?
Or was it a hunting accident, Jim?
Right. Well, it officially, who knows? I think officially it is. It was a hunting accident, and that is in the movie. It's vague too. It's obviously. I don't think anybody knows.
Doesn't seem that vague.
No. Yeah.
Well,
I guess.
Yeah. So I mean,
but you never see. Yeah.
Right.
I guess
you guys. I don't think have been around a lot of guns. I have. One of the things that when you're handling a gun, especially an established hunter as himself, the gun is always pointed down at the ground, whether you're walking with it, whether you're setting it. You would never set a gun against a fence, a rock fence, with the. Remember when he did that? He set the barrels. I said that's a bad idea.
Yeah,
and then it went off. But so it's just like that's.
Yeah. It's true. I mean, he did do stupid things before, but he was a hunter, and he shot that lion. So I think
it's pretty obvious. And it was. I think literally that's true. It was the day before this that he was supposed to debate Richard Burton.
Seems a little.
It seems exaggerated. I think that's true, though. I think I don't know. I'm not sure if that's just poetic license.
Compressed the timeline,
but who knows? Yeah,
I've got a question for you. Since again, I don't know a lot about guns, but is it also a bad idea to hand a cocked handgun to a small child?
Yeah, well, he didn't Speak didn't hand the gun to a small child, but he did hand it to. Mm-hmm. But then I was like, oh my God, they're really giving a handgun to a baby in this movie. So look forward to that scene. Yeah, I guess that was, but who gave him, the guy who gave him the gun was Burton. Burton gave him the gun.
Yeah, the king.
As the gift.
Yeah, and then the king gave it to the prince.
Speak did not give the king the gun as a gift.
Yeah, and he actually, in a moment of clarity, said, that's very dangerous.
Right.
Or something.
I don't remember that being in the book, in the real book. So that definitely was very symbolic. I think it was all like European, whatever, technology being introduced to the colonial.
Yeah, the corrupting power.
It's like a whole thing, I think. I don't know. Maybe that's what it was.
That whole sequence, I'm not the brightest one. I'm probably the dumbest one of the three of us. But I got lost a little bit in that sequel. Like I didn't quite understand why the king killed his henchmen.
Goes on for a long time. That they're like held hostage by this tribe in the center. Like they're halfway through their journey. They're kind of in the middle of nowhere, and they get abducted basically by this tribe, and they're kind of holding them. And that part definitely goes on for too long. But
I didn't understand why did he let him go? I didn't see the point where the relationship crested, right? Because something happened in that room when he was drugged and rolling around that made the king distrust his own right-hand man.
Yeah, it's like I think he just kind of he was kind of suspicious of him all along, and he had his locket. I think that's part of it. He knew he stole it from Burton, maybe, and
Burton, had defended him. That was like a line that he didn't let him cross before, and then he had crossed that line. That meant that something was
So
off.
I think he already didn't trust his henchmen, and then Burton kills his friend. Basically, they're gonna kill him anyways. The bad guys and.
He mercy killed him.
It's like, and so the king, I think that's respected him for that. I think that definitely seemed to be the case.
And that reminds me, so again, of another movie, The Man Who Would Be King, the John Huston movie with Sean Connery. I know Jim's seen it. Have you seen that, Chris? That could be a movie. Well,
I'll have to watch
there are only so many manly movies you can watch in one, 12 episode arc here, but it definitely
Sharky's Machine.
Exactly. But The Man Who Would Be King, there's a lot about
that's based on Rudyard Kipling in India, and that's where Richard Burton started in the army. This the whole other part of his life was in India, and he was kind of like a secret agent, I guess, too. He was like kind of went undercover and to get information basically for I don't know much about the British colonial Indian period, but it's it was pretty crazy, and obviously India didn't exist as a whole country, and it was all these separate warring factions, kind of, or the British used ones against each other. They formed alliances and attacked other parts, and it was all horrible and violent and bloody. And so Richard Burton was involved in that, I think, as a secret agent, basically, gathering information on tribal stuff in all over India. But
all those kind of weird manly empire, the primitive people and the conquerors, but then also the complexity of that, and then exploiting the naivete of the natives, but then it getting kind of
the hubris. Lawrence of Arabia had that too, right? He sort of thought he could walk into wherever, and he got raped for it, and these guys got a spear in the face, and a lot of body horror in this film.
And so when I was driving up, that's the one thing, the bug in the ear scene was what I remembered. And then I remembered the spear in the face after that. Like right when the movie started, I was like, oh yeah, there's that too. When I saw Patrick Bergen's face, or he was talking about something, they're sitting there, and I was like, oh yeah. because it was, and I know Jim knew too. I don't know, for some reason it was just like seeing his face, turning and looking, and it was like, oh yeah, he gets a spear in that face. I forgot about that. It's just like, yeah, that
blew my mind. That scene, I was like, this is the end of the movie. Like the guys,
when he's swinging his head around with it stuck in it. He's like,
yeah, oh my god.
And then like almost like a couple minutes later, Speak is getting stabbed
in both, in his,
slowly
one of his arms,
in
both
each,
his legs.
both legs,
Thighs.
and then in an arm, and it's just like, wow, that is a great way to open a movie, I guess.
Yeah, because you're like, where are these guys are going to walk into the middle of Africa? They've got a spear in his face. His legs got holes in them.
Yeah, is it really just a movie about two guys, like hobbled guys, trying to get out of the desert for the next 2 hours?
That's what it kind of felt like.
Yeah, it did.
but the bug in the ear, that I had actually forgotten all about that, and then I remembered it again. But after seeing this movie for the first time, whatever, 25, 30 years ago, ever since, I've never slept without like my head, blankets pulled over my head, I think. That's probably where I started.
I definitely sleep with a pillow on my head. What do you do, Chris? What are you going to do from now on? Earplugs?
No, I sleep face down.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm not worried about a bug crawling in my ear. I'm not afraid of it.
So what's scary is somebody I knew had that happen. Had a bug crawl. Yeah.
Wait, in civilization?
In real life, yes.
And what happens?
It was a cockroach. Right?
Yeah. It drives you crazy. I don't want to tell somebody else's story, but when he was telling me this story, it's like you wake up and you've got this amazing scratchy noise in one of your ears.
Oh, no.
And bugs don't back up. So it's just going to keep going. And then running to the drugstore, I think he said, and got like the ear thing, right? Like the ear cleaning kit. Sprayed the ear cleaning kit in there. It started bubbling, and it just started scrabbling more.
Oh, no.
And then... went to the hospital, and somebody, like the nurse, tried to grab it with tweezers and pulled off a leg or something. It was just like that, and then finally got it out and screamed or something. It just sounds like it's a horrific experience, apparently.
But he didn't stick a compass into his
ear.
That seems overreacting a bit. I don't know, like, jamming it in that hard. I don't know. Yeah, in this movie, I don't know. That was a little extreme.
It stays with it. That and like...
But that's true. Yeah, that's definitely in the book. That's real, because he couldn't hear. Yeah, he perforated his eardrum or something.
All right, now I'm going to have to sleep with headphones on.
Exactly. You got to do something, man.
You got to protect your ears.
Yeah. It's just so tempting for those bugs.
Oh, Jesus. That is horrible.
Kansas City. Food-wise, a city famous for its barbecue. But that's about to change. My name is W. Dave Keith, host of the podcast Taco the Town, and I believe that Kansas City is one of the most underrated, underappreciated, up-and-coming taco towns in the USA. On Taco the Town, we will shine a light on all the amazing tacos Kansas City has to offer. Kansas City is a great taco town filled with a variety of untapped taco stylings and flavors, and on the Taco the Town podcast, we won't stop until we've tasted every taco in the town. No taco table will go unturned. Each episode, we review a new taco joint with a special guest. We share taco memories, discuss taco topics, and put tacos to the test. We check the latest stories in taco news, and no taco is off the table on Taco the Town. If you love tacos, like I do, you're gonna love Taco the Town. Available on iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, and Google Play. That's Taco the Town.
Some notes on the film. It cost $18 million to make. It made $4 million.
I am even amazed in 1990 that this film got made, right? So if you think about the history of film, right? So, yeah, I mean, another reason why it feels like a 60s film is because, yeah, it's got sex and violence and all that kind of stuff, but it's not, there's nothing about it that I think a movie company would want to pay for. You know, by the 1980s, and that's the thing is Bob Rafelson hasn't directed that many movies.
They made movies like Out of Africa, and
I
mean they kind of made these weird.
The Line. What's the one with Michael Douglas and Val Kilmer?
The Ghost in the Darkness.
Ghost in the Darkness.
Yeah, that's kind of the same. Or a little bit later, a little after this.
Yeah.
The sex scene in this was a lot, and thinking more about it referencing other films was like Don't Look Back. Have you guys ever seen Don't Look Back? with Julie Christie and Donald
Sutherland.
Yeah, that
Oh,
was
man.
a weird sort of shadowy.
I get chills just thinking about that
sex
movie,
scene.
that ending of that movie.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah, Nicholas Regg died a while ago, and I just...
super creepy.
Yeah, I can't... That's
a lost and found and rewound film,
Yeah.
I would say.
that movie people reference so much. I think it was so profoundly influential when it came out, and the fact that it doesn't seem like it's had the kind of. Well, I think it's because Nicholas Regg's, the other movies he's made are just so weird. And well, The Man Who Fell to Earth, I guess. I'm trying to think of the ones. I saw the crazy one in the theater at the Art Theater in Champaign. Teresa Russell and Gary Oldman. It's like called Track 29. It's like a later 80s film. And I just remember like Gary Oldman like on piggyback on top of Teresa Russell, like screaming or something. I can barely remember the movie, but it was just like so nuts. And so Nicholas Regg. Nicholas Regg was the editor on Lawrence of Arabia, right? That's what's even crazier is I think I'm going to look that up. I'm pretty sure.
There you go. There's a lineage.
It's a lineage.
I
Very
thought that was
tenuous
the,
one.
the
Or was
young,
it- oh, what's her
young
name?
Woman, yeah.
Oh, you're right.
She was really young, and
Yeah.
she,
So what did Nicholas Regg?
she was at the. She was. I saw her at the Roger Ebert Fest down in Champaign. He showed a new print of Lawrence of Arabia, 70 millimeter print, and she was there. He interviewed her, and she said it was the best it had looked. It looked better than the premiere in London. That showing in Champaign.
Were you at the Eberfest where Bob Rafelson was? Were you?
I think so.
There? Yeah.
'Cause I
'cause
can't-
that's-
I was
that
trying to
movie-
remember that. I thought he was.
Yeah, and it
I
was
couldn't
that-
remember what movie he was showing.
like
He
Blood
showed-
and Wine. It's
Yeah.
So this is the thing about Roger Ebert is like I'm pretty sure he would be friends with filmmakers, and he'd kind of give good reviews to his friends'
Yeah.
movies, which I guess is a natural thing. So when we went to that one Ebert Fest, he showed this movie Blood and Wine. It's got Jack Nicholson. I can't even remember it, and it was just like, wow, this is just like old '60s dude movie, but like totally out of touch kind of film. In the same way that like how this movie was out of time,
Right.
But this is a few years later. It's like a 50-year-old dude. 50-year-old dude, yeah, here. Who's talking? But, it just felt...
50-year-old.
I barely remember the movie, but it just felt
Yeah.
like, why would anyone like this movie? So this is the other thing, is Peter Hyams. So I'm always suspicious. The guy who did Capricorn 1, right? He was a news reporter, or worked at Channel 2 News in Chicago. So he was buddies with, like, hung out at the same bar all the reporters did.
The Billy Goat.
Yeah, whatever, yeah. And so his movies, like, what's the one from the 90s with Mimic, right? Have you ever seen that movie? I saw that in the theater because Ebert gave it a good review. And it's about, like, these cockroach, like,
Aliens
doppelganger
or- yeah.
aliens in the subway system of New
Right.
York. And what's her name is in it? Is it Mira Sorvino or
Yeah,
something
Mira
like
Sorvino, but isn't that about the Mothman in Chicago?
Maybe, but it's just, I feel like Bob Rafelson must have been another person like this, whereas like Roger Ebert would kind of help him out if he had it. Well, the thing is he didn't need his help, but
Well, this was a good film.
this was a good
yeah,
film.
yeah.
This one was good.
It actually only has a 68% on Rotten Tomatoes by critics, although I couldn't find a bad review, so I'm not sure where the dings come from. It only won one award, the Evening Standard British Film Award. So was this only a British film?
No,
Or was this
no.
released in the States?
yeah,
I guess
it
if it was on sneak previews, then...
I read an interview with him just kind of recent, 2014, with Bob Rafelson, and he's talking about this movie, how much he loved it, and how it was so kind of bummed out that it didn't do anything, and he definitely blames sort of the studio went bankrupt, I think, and they weren't into, it was Carol Co. Pictures, but it was distributed by some other, like, I don't know if it was TriStar or something, but they had so it wasn't their movie. The promoters weren't. It wasn't their movie. They had their own period movie coming out at the same time, which was Glory, the Civil War.
Oh.
And so they backed that one. That was his theory. He was like, well, yeah, and this Rafelson's movie wasn't their movie. They were just promoting it. And so they put all their resources into Glory because that was their movie. So
I think a
he
film
kinda
of this
stopped.
heft needs a big marketing campaign. Like I or a big star, and it didn't have either.
That was the other thing he admitted. He kind of was like, there weren't any big stars, but
I mean, now when people go back to see what Jorah Mormont has done in his previous career, this film was going to have a new life, a second life.
Yeah. Nicholas Regg was the second unit director on Lawrence of Arabia. He was not the editor. Sorry.
Speaking of stars, in my housekeeping items, I had listed the things that I've watched since last film. One of them was Killing Eve, which...
the TV series.
Yeah, and the woman from Killing Eve is the love interest in this film.
Fiona Shaw.
Yeah, she's fantastic in it. The other things I watched were Mindhunter, which is
the TV series? Or
Yeah, it's great.
I started watching that, and I fell out of it. I watched the first few episodes of the first season, but
it's a little slow. I'd advise you to keep watching it because it gets really good.
Yeah, maybe I'll do that.
I watched Glow, and then I watched in the theater in a row in the same day, First Blood, Rambo, First Blood Part 2, Rambo 3, John Rambo, and Rambo Last Blood.
So that just came out. So that was like a big...
2 days ago, I watched every Rambo. I took my son to see every Rambo film.
It's from what I remember. The shock was how different Rambo or First Blood and Rambo. Right? What's the second one called? Rambo 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Sorry, the first film was called First Blood. The second film was called Rambo First Blood Part 2.
Okay, yeah.
The third film was called Rambo 3. The fourth film was called John Rambo.
I don't need to hear all the names again.
The fifth film is Rambo Last Blood.
And when is Rambo Creed coming out? Or what is it? Rocky Rambo Creed 2?
Yeah, did Rambo have it'll be the Brian Dennehy character? It'll be Dennehy.
But there's a distinct, total politically different, tone between First Blood and Rambo First Blood 2, right? They don't feel.
Yes,
that's what I remember.
First Blood is about.
It's like a 70s
PTSD.
movie.
It's about it's about guys coming home from the war, not being treated respectfully, not being able and being treated like garbage, even though they fought for their country.
Yeah.
And they did what they were told, right? And we've certainly reversed that narrative. Now we have thank you for your service. So we don't really blame the soldiers anymore, but back then we did, and Stallone went hard after that. First Blood Part 2, Rambo First Blood Part 2 was about us leaving POWs in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Because we reneged on some deal to pay somebody something. The country, we were supposed to pay $8 million, and basically they kept our POWs because we reneged on that deal. So it was him. But then Rambo Last Blood is all about how if we don't build a wall, we're going to be flooded by killers, murderers, and
really? Wow.
Yeah,
wow,
it was very Trump centric.
So that's what was shocking to me. I remember when I saw the second Rambo movie, let's just call it that, Rambo First Blood Part 2. First Blood seemed very, very much, even though it was after the 70s, right? Or was it? Anyways, it felt
1980.
It felt like a 70s movie.
40
the next
years
one
ago.
felt like a Reagan movie, right? So the second is where, and I remember, I think it was in college and watching the first, I can't remember where, I think it must have been seeing the second movie. They showed the second movie, or maybe they showed the first movie, but seeing both movies and realizing how the world was changing. And it was like, if movies are going to be like this now instead of explorations of kind of like what this movie we're talking about, right? It's kind of like we're going to have that era. We have that era of American Empire movies, right? And that Reagan era really I'm thinking of like Red Dawn. It's like it was really quickly that kind of liberal 70s kind of progressive. Yeah, the war was bad, but
the soldiers weren't. Soldiers doing what they
and like trying to work out all those issues, and then it just became war, kill. There are bad people, let's kill them. Kind of it went to that kind of Reagan Cold War, back to the very good guy, bad guy kind of filmmaking.
Interestingly enough, Rambo 3, and now that you mention it, the first half of Rambo 3 is a lot like this film that we just watched today. Mm-hmm. And I'm not kidding. He goes to Afghanistan. He learns the customs of the people. He actually plays that game with them where they drag a dead sheep around.
I'm trying to remember if I saw this movie.
It's like he actually is learning all about that. And there's no violence or action in the whole first half of the film. And I was actually quite captivated by it. And then the second half is like all violent, and there's Russians. You know, the Russians are the bad guys. Of course, the Taliban are the good guys because Rambo is joining forces with the Taliban to help them fight the Russians, and that's just kind of falls flat. It's just all the same schlocky bullshit. And then at the very end of the film, there's a freeze frame, and the card comes up and says, "This film is dedicated to the people of the Taliban." And
Oh my God!
did you not know this?
No.
He's helping basically Osama bin Laden and those. It's like the brave freedom fighters of the Taliban and
Right,
their fight against the Russians.
Afghanistan is so messed up.
Is-
Not.
And that's what Richard Burton was involved in. The British were in the 1840s and
in Afghanistan, right?
Yeah,
they couldn't beat him either.
Yeah.
And by messed up, I mean, just how it's affected so much of our history and war and the people we were helping out to battle the Russians, right, wound up being the people who wound up going after us, right?
And taking down 9/11. It's amazing because they talk about they're run by the Russians. So like, let's flee to Pakistan. Like it's like just a playbook for what happened with Osama bin Laden. And then there's this little boy at the very end who's like, "Thank you, Rambo," and Rambo gives him like a necklace to remember him by for good luck. And I'm like, I lean over to my son and I'm like, that young boy turned out to be Osama bin Laden.
Well, you know, I mean, I'm got the chills again. I mean, you know whose dad built, one of the Saudi Arabian American Air Force bases. I mean, the bin Laden family is a construction company.
Oh,
That's
right.
where all his money came from. Osama bin Laden spent a huge amount of time working on American Air Force bases and stuff for his father's company. It's and that's why, all those people who were part of that company and part of that family, got put onto planes after 9/11, or on 9/11.
They were the only planes that flew out of this country.
Exactly, because
were the
it's
bin
like,
Ladens.
these are the people who built our Air Force bases in Saudi Arabia, and it's like, they got one of their sons apparently got the wrong idea when he was hanging around here.
Yeah, I mean,
Got bent out of shape about those Americans hanging out and sinning and building bases in our country.
it would have been hard for them to live in America after that.
Yes, exactly. That's true too.
This you're talking all this about these Rambo movies. I thought it was right. That company that put out Mountains of the Moon that went bankrupt was the same company. It's this Carol Co. They did all those Rambo movies.
They did
too.
all the Rambo movies?
So that was
Did
just
they really?
before this came out, and so it was like that was the kind of the beginning of the end. They went bankrupt or something right after Mountains of the Moon, but it sounded like they had no interest in this movie at all, or they needed something to make money, and it obviously didn't. But
Again, you would need a big star and you would need a campaign. Like I think about Once Upon a Time in America, I think was a kind of a hefty, long, weighty picture that I watched as a kid. I think it actually did okay, but I think...
Did it?
I think it did because
I mean, I
because De
definitely
Niro was
saw
in it.
and but
I mean, I knew about it's not a Lost and Found or Rewound. It wasn't like as big as The Godfather, which I think is what their hope was. But I mean, it was big enough. But I mean, this film was great.
Carol Co. also did Cutthroat Island. That would help take you down too. That was the Rennie Harlin and
Gina Davis. But Rennie Harlin and Gina Davis did one of my favorite action films. My wife and I love it. It's The Long Kiss Goodnight.
Lady with the oil tanker. I saw that in the theater.
Yeah, with Samuel Jackson. So did we. We found it delightful.
I was already pretty cynical by the time I saw that.
I'd say of the three of us, I probably have the most tolerance. Which, you might guess from... I just sat through 9 hours of Rambo movies and laughed my ass off with my son. So
I think I actually said something like, somebody might have said, "Oh yeah, maybe we should go see that Rambo movie." And I said, "I'm not even listening to you talking." One of my children might have said that. I think I actually said, "I absolutely will not go to see that."
you say Uncle Chris will take you
Exactly.
not only to that film, but to the four preceding films. There really was Rambo 3 kind of slowed down on us, but then the fourth Rambo is so delightful that it really re-energized us, and we made it through.
I don't think you know what that word means. You keep using, what is it? You keep using that word,
I
but
do.
I do not think you know what it means.
Well, when I'm smiling and enjoying something, I feel like it's delightful. Is that wrong?
No.
Although my wife tells me, sometimes she has to lean over and say, "Don't laugh at that." Because I'll, be sitting... I remember, speaking of Sylvester Stallone, I was watching Copland. Copland.
I love that movie.
Yeah, I love it, too. And
It's
I
got a
love
little
Stallone
bit of
in it.
ear terror in it, too.
It does, yeah. It does have ear terror.
Hearing loss. It's one of my things.
You don't like it.
No.
You're anti-hearing loss.
Yeah. Anytime in a movie someone shoots off a gun next to someone's head and then they make that high-pitched squeal noise and you can't hear any sound in the movie, I'm just like, oh, I don't like that at all.
At the end of Copland, I think Stallone starts killing people like aggressively, and I'm like laughing my ass off after having cried through the middle of the film. And my wife was like, "You can't cry at this part, and you can't laugh. You got to stop laughing." So anyway,
that was my wife and I went to see Titanic after the movie had been out for like whatever, a month or 2 or 3 months, and everyone was saying it's the best movie in the world. Went to the theater. I think at the time we were musicians, so it was like during the day, and went into an empty theater with just 2 women in front of us and then the 2 of us, and it was like the 2 women. This was back in the old days when people would see movies over and over again. The 2 women were like, have you ever seen this before? And we're like, no. And then and they're like, oh my god, it is so good, this is like the 10th time we're seeing it and everything like that. And we're like, oh wow, okay. And then we start watching it, and then there's the scene where the bodies are falling. Do you remember this? The bad CGI of the plunging bodies
onto the rotaries.
We're literally weeping with laughter at the people plunging to their deaths and these poor women. It was just like, oh, so inappropriate. But it was just like, I can't take this seriously. This is
so. Should this film be lost?
I think this film is lost. I don't think very many people have seen this film.
But should it be lost? I guess
no. I'm sorry. Yeah,
I think it's a great film.
Yeah, it's great.
I hadn't seen it in several years, and I still enjoyed it. Yeah.
So should this film be found?
Yeah, and I'm a little frustrated. I think it is good. It would be good to watch it without. So if somebody listens to it and then watches it, it'll be kind of ruined, but not really. It's so visceral. It is a manly man movie, though. I don't feel like, but it's better than. Well, yeah, no, it's. I wouldn't say. Yeah, it's a little more enlightened as far as manly man. It's kind of like a '60s manly man movie that's slightly updated.
It's macho at points, but then it's also openly homoerotic and very cool with that. So I mean, in that way, it's progressive. So I think that's cool.
In fact, for 1990, it was pretty progressive.
Our test usually so far has been should it be found would mean would you say to a coworker or a class of students, watch this film? This one's safe, right? I would say this is a safe one to recommend.
Yeah.
The worst thing is they'd be like, this guy likes boring films, right?
Right, exactly. It is. It's kind of like, oh, this is some kind of old dude movie, right? Yeah, but I don't feel like, I feel like they wouldn't say to you, whoa, if
they wouldn't think you were a weirdo, like
right.
You asked them to watch Wicker Man.
Right, exactly. Yeah, the sexual stuff in Wicker Man is weird, right? I'm trying to remember now. It's been a while. But yeah, it just everything about it is weird, right? It's more pagan, whereas this is more.
Because even the homosexual stuff in this film was so comfortable. I don't think people would that was the nice thing about it, was the gay characters and the gay moments were so comfortable that it didn't feel like a big reveal or a big deal.
Right. Whereas in Wicker Man, it was like sort of, there was somewhat of an embracing, but still using it for shock value. There was still that kind of shock. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Whereas this was more like, just kind of normalizing.
Even the sex between him and his girlfriend in this film felt very natural. They're having a conversation, having a slap and a tickle. I guess I don't know what you call that.
Yeah.
It was all just very jovial.
Yeah, you know what? These were like realistic human relationships.
Yes.
And it was also like, men can, have an emotional connection. And it in some ways, it sometimes is like a romance. That's what's, I was a little giggly at certain points because they would like look at each other, or even at the end, it's like, it is playing it like a romance film. And that's kind of what it is. It's like you've got the traditional male-female kind of relationship, but then the male-male relationship is not as sort of macho as it would be in an action film or like a cop film, right? I did almost get a little weepy when he's touching the clay face and everything like that. It's like so weird and intense. I just didn't know how to process that. It was like, very intimate and strange and such a odd construct,
very like Blade Runner at the same time.
Yeah, because it's like a death mask, and he's a sculptor. He's molding, and is like, oh wow, it's such a weird moment. Like if you think about it, but it works, and it has it is a little heavy-handed, but it worked for me.
No, I thought it was a great moment. Yeah. That's when I turned to you both and asked to sculpt away the excess fat on my death mask, so I look better.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's like I don't want my death mask to look like me. I want it to look like
The best version
Yeah,
of me.
with like a good 30 pounds
The me Kardashian.
off. Yeah.
I came across the not his tomb, but there's a monument in the middle of Hyde Park in London
Oh, wow.
that I stumbled across once. It's like a big obelisk. It just says "speak" and something about the Nile and Nyanza Lake, whatever it's like.
Victoria
Nyanza.
or-
Victoria Nyanza. Yeah, I think the word for lake is Nyanza in Swahili or
Did
something.
he look like Jorah Mormont?
No, it was just. It's just a. There's nothing. No, it's not a
Oh.
statue. It's just a plinth. And that's the other thing too. I didn't see this personally. I saw this online more recently. Richard and Isabel Burton's tomb, which is outside of London, or not far from someone we know. I think Isabel, his wife, designed. He died first, and then she's buried there too now. But she designed the tomb. And it looks like a tent. It's like a stone, like a little mausoleum, but it looks like a tent. This very ornate little tent. But the creepy thing is, if you walk around the back, there's a little ladder and there's a window, and you can climb up, and you can see their coffins inside the crypt.
Oh,
And
wow.
There's all kinds of, there's like weird lanterns, like Eastern kind of lanterns and things. And there's a bunch of pictures online of it, but it looked kind of run down. It looks like recently they've cleaned it up. But for a while there, it was some of the pictures were obviously from several years ago, and it was like kind of looked creepy and dusty.
Like the Garden of Eden. If you
Right,
go to
exactly.
Jim and I went to the Garden of Eden, we didn't get to go into the tomb, but if
in
you
Kansas, yeah.
yeah, and I forget what the city is in Kansas.
It's
not Lefevre. I keep wanting to say
It's not Stull. It's
Stull.
No,
that's
it's
the
not
other
Stull.
place.
Yeah, that's where the devil came up.
It's what's it called?
I can't remember, but it's a guy who just did a bunch of cement sculptures in his yard and then encased himself in cement, and his wife. But
It's a pyramid. Yeah,
I recommend it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I recommend visiting. We need to go back when it's open because we kind of just drove out there. Should this film be rewound? Should we watch it again?
I think this is my third time watching it.
I'd say yes. I'd watch it again.
Yeah. In a few years.
Yeah,
give
it's
it a
definitely
rest.
I would not watch it immediately.
Yeah,
I need to forget about all the bad stuff, which I don't. I mean, that's the thing is like I think it's been probably 20 years since I've seen it. And it's like all the stuff starts rushing back. It's just like, oh, he's going to have to, oh, that's right. There is more. He's going to have to stab himself in the legs.
Going back to my thing about how this film references films before, although it seems like it's older than those films, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan.
right, the ear stuff.
Has
yeah.
the ear stuff
Oh, yeah.
as well.
We should mention that Roger Deakins worked on this film,
Yeah.
cinematographer.
We did the Coen Brothers movies, right?
he's done a lot of stuff,
Not all
yeah.
of them, but several of them.
Yeah, and interesting to see his earlier films. I guess he did Sid and Nancy too. I need to watch that again because he's a lot about natural light, but then also using lighting in the set. But he's got a cinematography blog that I haven't gone deeply into, but he talks about different lighting rigs and different strategies and sketches of how he does all his lighting and everything like that. And it's a lot of times. He, it's got collections of light bulbs that he's screwing into the fixtures in the set and everything like that. He's not just doing lighting, but he like manipulates the lighting in the set itself, like if it's a location and everything like that. And so there's some weird lighted moments. The lion, right when he was walking up to the lion, did you notice that there was like a huge like reflection, like using a big reflector on him to light up the what's his name, Patrick Bergen, but it was a strange moment. So it's nice to see that somebody who's like this master, where you see little moments that weren't quite right. So oh, okay, you're still learning stuff.
Right.
It sounds like the production was rushed. Well, like they didn't have a ton of money, but they did a lot of stuff on a shoestring, or like he did stuff stripped down. Like he didn't have the whole crew. Like him and a smaller group would go out. They were definitely a lot of this. Yeah, is all filmed in Africa, and they would just do these. It was kind of guerrilla-like, so it definitely was.
So was the lion scene real? I wonder how they shot.
Oh
that.
yeah.
Was it like that Tippi Hedren film Roar?
Oh, right, where she has where
they're living with
Living with
lions.
the lions,
People were
yeah.
mauled on set.
Yeah. And I just got to put in a word for Richard E. Grant, the evil publisher.
Yeah.
He's always amazing. And
Oh, I wanted to mention the music too. The guy who did this is Michael Small, and I really like the music in this movie. I don't know, it was kind of, it's kind of old-fashioned a bit. It's kind of like epic, but I think it works really well. Or it has
He wrote the African songs too, actually.
Yeah, there was some traditional stuff, but then he just kind of created stuff just in like rhythmic things and mixed it together. And did you look up about him? Like he did
Just about this film.
Klute. He did Klute and Parallax View.
Oh man, I love the music to Parallax View.
Yeah, and Marathon Man.
Oh,
and
Marathon Man's fantastic music.
The Driver.
Driver's a great movie, yeah.
And he did Star Chamber. Remember?
Yeah.
Chris. Man, so he's like a good conspiracy filmmaker, huh?
Yeah, because Chris and I got obsessed with Star Chamber 20-some years ago.
We did, yeah. Remember that?
I don't know if I instigated it or it was like, remember that? It was like just seeing TV ads. Like, neither of us had ever seen that movie called Star Chamber. That sounded looked really cool. And we rented it. It was in Lawrence, Kansas at that video store that you
Hastings,
were talking about. Yeah, and it was a letdown, right?
It was a letdown.
It's kind of like, I'd like to see it again.
It's kind of like the Octagon. I was always very intrigued, but then I watched the Octagon. I was like, this is terrible.
The preview was the best part of the movie.
Yeah. Well, just the concept of when now it's just MMA fighting. Now that you can watch the Octagon every Sunday at 2 p.m.
Oh, Omar Sharif was in this movie.
Yeah, that was weird.
Uncredited. Just speaking of Lawrence of Arabia,
he
that
was
was
in
Lawrence
of Arabia.
Yeah, and Dr. Zhivago, which Nicholas Roeg was also second unit cameraman on. I watched.
Oh yeah, we got to do our housekeeping. What did you watch?
Not to just extend this, but I just have to talk about this movie because I'm the only person who likes it. After Hours. I watched that again.
I love that
Martin
movie.
Scorsese movie. I've actually, that's a movie where I've recommended to a guy who teaches film at ISU, and I said, he was doing a Martin Scorsese thing, and I said, are you going to show After Hours? And he goes, I don't think I've seen that one. And then I said, well, okay, I'm going to say it's my favorite Martin Scorsese movie, and then my wife tells me every time I start laughing during the movie. Again,
there you go.
It's like there's something wrong with you. Why do you like this movie? Like it's like that's definitely a movie. And then this guy who's seen tons of films, obviously writes about film studies, everything like that.
Sure.
Said, your wife is right. There's something wrong with you after you watched it.
I love that movie. Doesn't Frank Oz get his brains blown out in that movie?
No, not After Hours.
Or am I thinking of Into the Night?
Yeah, maybe. After Hours is
maybe I have the wrong movie.
Griffin Terry Garr
is in it.
Yeah,
Catherine O'Hara.
It's a great movie.
Griffin Dunn. Who else is in it?
Yeah, he's just trying to get home.
Yeah.
He's
Right, he's trying to get home.
home.
That's a great movie.
Yeah.
It is
It is a
funny.
great movie.
It is comedy.
Yeah.
Oh, I laughed so much during that movie, but it's normal people don't like that movie.
Yeah, well, I'm not a normal person.
Yeah.
I've never claimed to be.
It's
I
like
try to be.
It's like dark, like Taxi Driver, but in a way that's funny. It's also stolen. Half of it is stolen from a Joe Frank episode.
Oh.
There was some kind of settlement made. The guy, somebody wrote it, NYU Film School guy wrote it, and apparently lifted most of it from a Joe Frank episode at the beginning of it. And then they bought the script and then had to settle later on when somebody realized, oh, this kid who wrote the script stole it. But a lot of it, not all of it.
So they bought the script and all the plagiarism that came with it.
I could tie in, like another British TV show, old TV show, to like I've been tying every movie we've watched to some British TV show. This reminded
Like Children of the Stones.
Yeah, right. And the whole Victorian explorer thing reminded me of there was this 70s show called Ripping Yarns.
Oh, okay.
It's with Michael Palin, and Terry Jones wrote it from Monty Python. And
I've heard of that show.
it's like boys' stories, like from the early 20th century. It's like based on, like, I guess, Edwardian kind of stories for boys, like before there were comic books. They have these silly, little adventure stories. And so every episode is some kind of crazy story, And one of the episodes is called something like Across the Andes by Frog. And it's all this, satire of this British expedition across the... Michael Palin is the leader of the expedition and wants to cross the Andes by frog. But it's one of the best episodes, and it's definitely...
Is it animated or is
no,
it...
No, it's regular. And like Denham Elliott is in that episode. He's really great.
Man,
but
yeah.
it's very much like a satire of like this people in mountains of the moon, the real people. It's like this is a nice...
They have no respect for British history.
Yeah, it's a nice antidote to if you watch one and watch this. But I think it's probably on YouTube. Cross the Andes by Frog.
All right. I'm watching it.
Oh, I know what I watched. This is a movie I can watch over and over again. I don't know what's wrong with me. It's a Liam Neeson film.
Taken? Yeah, I'd love it.
No, it's close
Oh.
though. It's the one about the wolves.
The Gray.
The Gray.
That's a fantastic
I
film.
love that movie. I there is something wrong with me. It's like men, plane crash. It's got the plane crash. It's got people being killed by animals, being hunted.
When he tapes the broken liquor bottles to his hand
hands.
to kill the wolf.
Yeah.
So there was a great moment where we all individually, there's about 5 of us who had watched Taken and loved it. Like this is before kind of Taken. It was right when people were starting to admit to one another that Taken was a good movie.
Yeah.
And so we were all like, yeah, you like Taken? Yeah, you like Taken? Because we're all supposed to be intellectual, but we're not. So then we're like, well, let's watch The Gray together. And if it's bad, we'll just make fun of it. And then we just like, at the end of it, we're just like, that was awesome. It was great.
It's got the death in that. There's a death where he basically brings someone across the threshold. I don't know if you remember. I'd forgotten it, and I watched it again, and it's like, wow. It's like he's
I don't remember
basically
it.
Somebody's dying and he's talking them through it. It's just like you're gonna feel it come over you. It's like the Liam Neeson voice, but instead of him like on the phone threatening someone, right? It's him guiding another man to death. It's similar where it's like this manly kind of but emotional, like almost intimate moment. Well, it is a very intimate moment, and it's death, and
You're going to hear your grandmother. Let it wash over you.
It's totally like that. And it's just like, oh, man, I hope Liam Neeson's there when I die, man. Like, if we can get him, bring him in to just guide me to the other side.
I'll be dead. Talk to Jim. He'll help you through that moment. I'll leave some money.
Start working on trying
for
to find
you
his
get Liam Neeson.
Yeah,
Maybe he just needs to make a tape or something.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. There's like a video in hospitals, like a hospice kind of video. Sorry,
it's actually
I'm obviously much darker than I think I am. I think I'm a pretty happy person, but it's just I don't know what it is about.
That reminds me of the Lester Holt videos at the Cook County when you go for jury duty, and it's like Lester Holt used to be on the local news in Chicago, and he for 20, I think I'm sure they're still there. They for the past 20 some years, the videos that introduce you, when you're a juror, you're waiting to be called. It's a video done by Lester Holt. So,
and I'm thinking of that scene in Soylent Green where Edward G. Robinson goes to the death house, and it's assisted suicide, and the whole beautiful film while he's.
I haven't seen Soylent
Flowers.
Green.
Oh my God!
I know. I gotta see it.
I think we need to do a special 3 parts Charlton Heston Apocalypse trilogy.
I haven't seen Omega Man. I haven't seen Soylent Green,
and Planet of the Apes. Right? The trilogy of the Apocalypse trilogy, Charlton Heston Apocalypse trilogy.
And on that commitment, we'll conclude today's episode.
okay. Good night. Good night.
Lost and Found and Rewound is fully funded by Lost and Found and Rewound Foundation funds. Lost and Found and Rewound does not use crowdfunding because our listeners have better things to do with their funding. There's no need to post reviews of Lost and Found and Rewound because our listeners have more valuable things to do with their time. In all sincerity, thank you for listening to the show. We truly appreciate it.